You gotta love that royalty-free music. So catchy.
It's just so fun.
It's so
I
catchy.
wish that was what we heard on the radio all the time. And
That. I think we might be back. I don't know. Let's just see. There's always a delay, so we're just going to hold tight here. We had a complete power outage in our studio. We thought it could still be weather related, but I don't think it is. It
it'd
was
be weather related, but yeah, it didn't seem like
it
it's
was
been bad. So
yeah, it was we were just gearing up and then the power went completely out. So all right, so she says we're back.
excellent.
Okay.
We'll see for how long.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was just saying it was too bad that it wasn't the future of energy.
You're right. Yeah, because we could have talked about
'Cause that would have been
the problem with the grid.
that would have looked really purposeful. We've actually, knock on wood, we've never had that situation happen.
Never. But I feel like once it's happened once, we'll see.
So
Maybe it never happens
I
again.
joke that I think
It's really weird.
the landscape team here at the office gets our newsletter and structures their time accordingly. So they fired up the leaf blower about 5 minutes before we started. And so I thought, wow, he knows we're getting ready to go live. And we immediately, I think, both thought it was him, but there's a bad thunderstorm here too.
I
But
can hear him in the distance, but I also hear thunder and lightning. So
this studio is so insulated from the rest of the building
yeah,
that we were in, I mean, literal pitch darkness. There's no other light because we have it all blocked off.
it takes a little while to get back to the light again.
Yeah, and so when you open the door and there was still
I see
lights
light down the
functioning
hall.
out there, we're like, okay, well, I guess it's not like a power outage.
Exactly. Well, at least all of you didn't have a power outage, or maybe you did. Who knows? But
Emily was
yeah.
like,
So they just
hey,
abandoned me. They just completely abandoned me.
everybody, nice to see you.
Yeah.
All right, well, welcome to the Wicked Opportunities live stream, everybody.
Yes.
That was a fun way to kick off this session.
All you can do is laugh.
Yeah, I mean,
it's life.
the only thing that we know for sure is that technology will fail us. Why it always shocks me that we put so much emphasis on technology.
When you move it from the pedestal to the throne, you're in trouble.
In trouble.
Empty throne. But yes, welcome everyone to another Wicked Opportunities Live. And of course, today we're going to be talking about the future of media.
Yes, that's the topic du jour, as they say.
Or demure.
Very mindful.
Yeah, it's cutesy.
That's very good. Speaking of media, us chronically online people. No, speaking of what's on the top of minds for me, I've got my Kamala shirt.
I actually do have a Kamala shirt on it.
Yours is nice. Yours is nice.
It's a fancy sort of Hawaiian looking.
Yeah. And let's be clear, the election will be part of what we talk about because there's a lot of media influence, but it's not the only thing we're going to talk about.
Right, because I'm sure that we have plenty of viewers that aren't in the United States. But that's interesting because I was talking with a friend of mine from London this week, and I believe that we talked to somebody from Asia this week as well, who both were saying that they watched the Democratic National Convention when more than half of Americans probably didn't watch the Democratic National Convention.
Yeah.
But And I follow this account on TikTok talking about social media again, that's very influential, has millions of followers. And she was saying that she had hundreds and hundreds of people write her from places not the United States that said they watched the Democratic National Convention.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I could speak, in
Yeah,
terms
so
of
it's amazing.
women's rights. We know that this election is absolutely monumental. And I think there's a lot of people watching with bated breath because
Yeah.
as the US goes. But we don't want to, we're going to talk broader than the election.
course.
Obviously, that's very timely and topical as it relates to the media. But just a few things while people are joining us. Just wanted to mention that we are still hosting our Ask a Futurist project. So I just wanted to
Yes.
highlight that.
It's been going awesome, and but it's still going on.
Yeah, so we're about halfway through our period of time when we're offering up those questions. So if you haven't had a chance to participate yet, it's not too late. And the way you start is by submitting a question, and then there are 15 daily questions, of which about half have already been teed up. Again, it's not too late to answer those. You don't have to answer all of them. You could just answer the ones that you feel most comfortable. But once you opt in, you can help us crowdsource a Foresight FAQ, frequently asked questions. So we're highlighting the top 15 questions we were asked. This has been such a popular project that I know we'll do it again. So this particular version, we're talking about Foresight implementation. So what are your top most burning questions about Foresight implementation? We've had some great ones and some great responses. If you're interested, by the way, in joining us for one of our 2 remaining foundations programs this year, every question you ask, every answer you provide enters you in to potentially win a free seat to one of those programs. So that's another reason. But anyone that participates, even if you don't want to win free tuition, you will get the compiled list of questions and answers that we'll publish later this year once we get through all of that data. So a great resource. It will be a great resource that we are really pulling from the crowd of futurists around the globe. So if you haven't had a chance, if you didn't know about it, now's your chance. Emily dropped in the chat information about it, and we'd love to have you join us in that project, in the Ask a Futurist project. I mentioned our foundations program. So we have our next foundations program is coming up in LA, well, in Burbank in October. There's still time to join us. We are going to be talking about the future of media. We're going to be building scenarios around the future of media. So if you are planning on joining us, this is a great session to sit in on this live stream, because it's going to give you sort of a precursor of the conversations that are going to be happening across 3 days in Burbank in October. So we're going to use our Natural Foresight Toolkit. We're going to collaborate with 20 or 30 folks that we're pulling together for this cohort, and we're going to tackle this very important topic of the future of media. For each of these programs, because it is hands-on and we're building a set of scenarios, we always create a focal issue document. And I shared that on my socials. I think Emily has a link to that as well. So if you want to follow along as we're having a conversation today, you can open up that future of media focal issue document. Of course, we're only scratching the surface in this document, as we will in this conversation. But if you want to take a look at that document, if there's something in that document, in that set of questions that sparks interest to you, and you want to drop that in the chat yourself about what you want to talk about today, what you want us to talk about or opine on, or what your opinion is, please do so. We love to get your input in the chat. But those are some of just the housekeeping things. By the way, the final foundations program this year will be live online. So we have the one in LA in October. That's going to be the future of media. The final one that's live online, which will stretch across a couple of weeks, we'll do half days across October, November. That one's going to be the future of well-being.
Yeah.
So either of those topics interest you, even if you're not focused in on those topics, it's a great way to apply Foresight. We have folks that come from within those segments, external to those segments.
But it's people from outside of those as well, because definitely if I were in one of those segments, this would interest me. But just so that you know, as Yvette said, we pick a focal issue for every one of our foundation's programs because you need something that you really can work on. So don't worry if you hear this, future of media, future well-being, and it's not your specific field. As all good futures topics,
Yeah,
media is not only about media,
absolutely.
it's broad. And we just use those as focal issues, really. So this is not a future of media program. It's about foundations of natural foresight. We just use that as a topic so that we can get our hands dirty. It's project based.
Yeah, we could apply our tools to a real topic and let's be honest. Everyone should be concerned about this topic. Everyone should be thinking about this topic. And the best insights about a topic like the future of media are going to come from people outside of media.
That's right.
What I love about the fact that we're doing this in Burbank is we're going to have media folks there too. I'm really excited to tap into my Disney network and have a lot of friends, or former friends and old friends show up as well. But we really want to attract people from outside that realm. And it's one of the reasons why we're hosting this live stream, to start the conversation now and get it going. Because at the end of the day, whether it's media or democracy, the topics are absolutely linked. We all have to engage in these conversations.
Right.
We all
Absolutely.
have to, we have a duty to engage in these conversations, friends. And, I respect if people feel like, well, I'm no expert, or, I have a lack of confidence in this issue.
Yeah.
Trust me, if you have an interest and a passion in where this world is going, then you should have a say and be able to, add to the conversation, especially as a foresight professional, no matter where you are in your practice of this field. Even if you're
That's right.
early on, I think, those folks sometimes have the best insights.
That's right. And especially since, and getting back to the future of media again, since that's our WO Live topic today, the media, has traditionally been known as the fourth estate, which is a term that's old. It goes way back to when the nobility was still around, the power of divine kings, the right of divine kings. And it might have been also known as the fourth power. Because the fourth estate really referred to the media being that fourth arm of society, which included the clergy, the nobility, the commoners, and then those who told the news or the story, or the media. And so that has changed over time because I believe lawyers have also been thrown in the mix at some point and thrown back out again. But if you're a lawyer on here today, no offense.
Yeah. Lawyers. I'm going to tell you right now, when I heard that Kamala already has appointed a bunch of lawyers, ready to go, which as they should after what happened 4 years ago, I was excited about that. I'm just going to just share a little bit of what's in this document just to kick us off.
Yeah, sure.
You wrote it, so I'm sure you'll think it's brilliant. But you wrote it a while ago, so maybe you don't even remember your brilliance. So media is not simply an instrument of mass communication, information delivery, and knowledge transfer. Media plays an outsized role in individual and social development through its pervasive influence in our lives. Media is a powerful tool used to shape our perspectives and values, not only through intelligence that has been curated, but through illusory ideas that are often presented as reality. I mean, we could have an hour-long discussion just on that sentence that I just said.
Correct. And we will talk about that a little bit today.
It is through media that we learn, perceive, and develop our pragmatic views, even without realizing it. For these reasons, our perspectives can be easily manipulated, and this can result in significant consequences on our personal and collective beliefs and behaviors. Media has the power to shape our institutions, our governments, and our world. This means that it is critical for us to be aware of the power of media and to actively engage in shaping its future for the betterment of people and the planet. And then we have a series of questions that we can touch on, but maybe we can start with what we're seeing right now on the political landscape, because I think it's really, really interesting to see the discourse about the Democrats' new nominee, Kamala Harris, and the fact that I mean, we always say, I love the joke. I just want to live in precedented times because
Tired of unprecedented.
tired of unprecedented times. As a futurist, I never thought I'd say that, but yeah, maybe some precedented times would be great. But obviously, it was unprecedented that we had, basically at the final hour of this election,
it's crazy.
a change in the candidate. And that obviously created a sea change in all different things. But one of the things that it has caused is a redirection of the way that the Democratic Party has positioned its candidate, who is much younger, who is obviously of representing several minority groups, as well as being a woman. I mean, there's a lot to do there. But also, I think this way that they've positioned the media or the communication around this candidacy has a lot to do with the fact that her personality is such that it lends itself to be more authentically captured in memes and in communications that have become increasingly important. We have been playing with memes in our marketing the last couple weeks in a way to sort of emphasize how much memes have become an additional language that really connects us. And so and there's a really interesting, like, we're going to talk about traditional media as well today, but there's an interesting thing about people who are like sort of pinching their nose and saying, oh, she's just a meme candidate. And it's like the words just in front of that really says a lot about whoever's saying that. It's super, super interesting how it's easy for someone to discount the impact of those forms of communication and influence, right? And I just want to spend a few minutes talking about how that type of, whether it's on social media or other formats, how that type of communication and language, this new form of language, is really taking a big center stage in this particular election. But it's been important for some time.
For a while, for a hot minute now, and as we might say. And just to back up for just a second, it's, you talked about this, and it's really about story, right?
Oh, yes.
Whether it's story about, and I'm going to put this in air quotes, reality.
Yeah.
Boy, there's a lot to say there.
There is.
Or if it's literally like somebody else's story, because there is this, and we'll circle back to this because let's stay on what you're talking about. But there's this idea that the media has gotten out of control somewhat because it's, and this is tied to this. I think it's tied to, and not only, but in large part to the rise of the net. That media has shifted from telling us the news to telling us opinions and stories and ideas about what might happen.
It's so interesting though, because it's
largely that.
I know, but we know as futurists that even the present is interpreted through our own lens.
Of course.
So again, I agree with you, but I just think it's really interesting that even if we could really align, which would be almost impossible, on what is fact, what is present versus
that's my air quotes.
What is future? It would be difficult because even when we're presenting the past, we always say, like, you think the past is set in stone, but the past is, belongs to those who conquered primarily. Those are the dominant narratives that we hear. So even when we think something is like set, like the past or even the present, it's not, because it's subject to interpretation. I think, and this all can go back to, like, we can do 12 podcasts on this. This is why we're covering this for 3 days in Burbank, and it's going to be so amazing. I think that it's tough because part of what challenges not only journalists but futurists is this lack of attention spans. And so, which one came first, the chicken or the egg? Is the attention span low because of things like memification and social media, or is that causing the attention? I think it's both, right? It's cyclical. So I think journalists, and I agree, there's a whole conversation to be had around how we're not supporting true journalism and we're not paying for journalists, and it's great that the internet is open and we have everybody being a journalist and being creative. But then the flip side of that is that we're like, where is the Walter Cronkite telling these folks what's the truth?
Tom Brokaw, what happened? I think this is a part of what I was talking about, but there's a flip side to what I'm about to say as well, right? Because in a recent Rolling Stone article, it just came out a couple of days ago, one of the Rolling Stone journalists who says, I know I'm a media elite. And I'm going to tell you, when I went to the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, that I saw a bunch of media elite whining and crying and saying, do you know who I am?
I this term elite, like I feel like we don't even realize how much our own language has been hijacked.
That's right. That's right.
Because the fact that we're saying media elite a la coastal elite,
yeah,
when these journalists probably are eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches
to a large degree.
To whom?
They're not the popular news people anymore. The influencers are. The influencers on TikTok and Instagram and other places are making millions of dollars, and these guys get a salary.
Because that's where people are getting their news,
that's
right?
So this is what I was about to say, which I feel like I'm saying 5 things at one time because there's so much to talk about here. But a part of the media elite's complaint is like, look at all of the influencers that the DNC gave passes to and put on the floor when they don't do any research. They just go on TikTok and go like, vote for Kamala. Da, 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 da.
Actually, that's a very good ad. We're going to go ahead and
grab that part out, right? And the media guys are like, well, I have to stay up all night and research journal articles.
So let me ask you this. Is there a parallel here with futurists that are like, oh my gosh, that person just gets online and talks about AI and the metaverse, and they're not real foresight professionals. And here I am with my degree or my certification.
And I'm whining and crying because, like, I have a master's degree in foresight, and you shouldn't be like asking that guy to speak on stage who just speaks about AI all the time, and that guy who speaks about AI all the time, at least for now, is making, X amount of dollars per year that I'm not making.
Yeah, so. It's a nuanced conversation. It goes all the way back to what I've said for a long time, is that we weren't old enough for the internet.
It basically comes down to that, right?
And so, again, I think educating our populace, educating our citizens.
But and you just said it's so powerful. It's like educating the populace, because a part of what some of these influencers, careful what I just did a minute ago, because it's not completely true. All the influencers aren't just like gloss and no substance.
Absolutely not.
Many of the influencers are substance.
They're thought leaders, really.
They're thought leaders.
Creators. Yeah.
And so my little act about, vote for Kamala would not be completely true, because the fact of the matter is, a lot of these influencers feel like the media is not telling the whole story, and they're getting the story out that's not being told by.
And let me just say,
who, like, for instance, in the United States, even the liberal media, whatever that means, if you really know the ins and outs of these channels, it's not as cut and dry as you get from some of these candidates. It's not that way. CNN is very centrist now, blah, blah, blah. They fawn over Trump. They'll be like, oh, well, maybe any moment now he's going to turn presidential. It's been 10 years. Well, who knows? Maybe today's the day.
Okay.
And the media people the influencers are like, no.
But why is that? I mean, it's the same way that, content creators get influenced. It's by clicks and ratings.
That's right.
And Trump is the best way as a traditional media outlet to continue to get attention. Correct. I wanted to go back to your...
What sells, what bleeds leads, what feeds needs feeds.
New York, you said media is not telling the whole story. So I happened to see a TikTok from a content creator this morning when I was getting ready, about the New York Times. So the New York Times, obviously a significant publication in the United States, is a publicly traded. If you look on the surface, like, oh, it's publicly traded. But if you look beneath the surface, you will see that about 70% of the New York Times holdings is controlled by the family that's had it for generations. And if you go further, they talk about this, content creator talked about this article, ironically, that the Atlantic did on the person that's leading the New York Times. It's part of this family, and about how he says in this publication that their podcast, which I'm not going to remember the name of it, but their daily podcast is actually, I don't know if you know this, it's actually more powerful to them right now. It's more popular than the front page of the newspaper.
It's worth more,
So they get more viewers, more interest. So the reason that this was brought up is because if you look at the New York Times, you're like, okay, they're balanced. They're talking about Trump, but they had an op-ed piece that talked about Biden needed to step down, and people really pushed back and said, really? Seriously? But if you listen to their podcast, it's completely right-leaning. And so it's back to, you got to follow the money. But anyway, media isn't just about journalism and the election. I want to talk about, other forms of media and talk about like sort of how we get back to that story element if we can.
I do want to get back to it, but I just got to say again, it's like when we're talking about the future of media, we have to think about these kinds of things, right? Because if it's about follow the money, then you're going to be influenced by who's got the money, right? Like one of the most popular media outlets in the world today is the Joe Rogan podcast. Spotify bought, Rogan for what was it, 100 million, 150 million or whatever. I mean, he's just raking in the money.
Yeah.
And people go there exclusively to get their news in many ways. And of course, extremely not right leaning, actually conspiracy theory leaning.
Yeah. Well, it's that whole conversation about fake news, the post-truth landscape. I think, again, it's this tension between wanting open information and then not having the Walter Cronkite.
That's what I was going to say. Back to the fourth estate again. The clergy aren't supposed to be people that are in it for the money. The commoners obviously aren't living for the money. And the media is not supposed to be about money.
It's fascinating when you really
now it's an industry
when you really think about the dual-edged sword of when we open up industry, when we open up these professions. And we talk about democratizing, because we talk about democratizing foresight and futures thinking, right?
It's the same thing in this industry, because we see all the time. If you follow any of the major associations listservs online, the futurist listservs, there will be at least once a year, if not many multiple times a year, an argument for a couple of weeks about should futurists be starving artists who just tell you the truth, or is foresight a discipline to be used to sell more Cheerios?
Again, I think it's just this really interesting tension.
Because it's hard not to be in foresight for 48 hours after you found it for the first time without going like, wow, there's no way to avoid talking about better futures for humanity. I can't only use this to sell more Cheerios.
And yet, you exist within the context of everything that came before you, to quote my Madam President. And so as we're trying to topple the systems, we're working within them. And so I was
just thinking when you said that, we were talking yesterday about the futures triangle. And Joseph Voris was saying yesterday in a conversation that we were having online, a bunch of us were having online, it wasn't just me and him, that he was saying that he likes to use the futures triangle. And if you're not familiar with the futures triangle, you've got the pull of the future, the weight of the past, and the reality of the present, or whatever it is. I get that wrong sometimes, but it's present, past, future on the parts of the triangle. And so you get to talk about like what's weighing us down from the past or needs to continue on. And that's what he was saying, is that like, instead of just doing it very cut and dry, he likes to use the future triangle because the past matters too. We're in the context of what, but so we have to think about the past and how it's weighing on us, but we also want to escape the velocity, the gravity well of the H1 present and past so that we can see new futures. And he said, and the way I do that is I break them into parts. So when I talk about the past, I say, what do we want to carry forward? What is weighing us down? The future. What future do I want to see? What future am I afraid of? The present. What present, should continue on and be extrapolated? And what present, are we trying to jettison? And so that's a little bit better way of think about it, but I worry about the past and present often being a millstone around our neck and holding us back from true transformation. And this relates to the media and story and the whole nine yards.
And what happens, like, it's already a cluster, like we've just set up the stage here, which again, this is news to none of you that are listening to this,
it's
right?
A cluster cluck. I did not say
it's a cluster cluck. Now add to it AI.
Oh boy.
Deep fakes.
Yeah. And it's like, I saw a TikTok this morning. This woman was like, when I had to write all my old content, influencing content myself, I was making $1.95 a week. Now that I've unleashed it to AI, it was like, I make $1 million a year. AI does all my content for me. And I mean, media is using AI now too.
No, I mean it further distances us from the source of the story, from the
Sure does.
impact. And I think the technology again is outpacing our cognitive ability because we aren't investing in the education to teach people how to critically think about these
Oh boy.
stories.
I was just telling you yesterday that I had just read an article from Vivian Wang,
Yes.
who, if you've never read Vivian before, amazing.
Amazing.
And she started an AI company a couple of years ago. As a matter of fact, more than a couple of years ago. She's not like, new to the scene. She's been doing that kind of technology work for a long time, but she's also very much in the Timnit Gebru camp with AI ethicist and what does it mean? And it's not some new alien intelligence. It's literally, it guesses the next word for you. So she's like, I understand what the value of it can be, and I also want to talk about what the dangers are. And she was giving stats, and she said they have already found over the last 2 years of doing research on LLMs in education that when K through 12 students are allowed to use LLM to increase their learning ability, when they use it, they have a 17% greater ability to produce quality content. But that once it's taken away from them, they've used it for a period of time, it's taken away, their ability to produce quality content in their learning goes down by 34%.
So it's like a crutch and it's they're worse off.
Yeah, so
Their
it's like when you're
muscles
using it, it
yeah.
looks like it's helping you. And when it goes away, your ability to think critically, it turns out was actually lessened. It reminds me of a book. Who was it, the gentleman that wrote, the famous author that wrote Jurassic Park? Do you remember? Anyway, he wrote a book and never got made into a movie called Prey. Oh, his name's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, put it in the chat if you remember who wrote Jaws and who wrote Jurassic Park. It's the same person. And he wrote a book called Prey. And it turned out that what was going on in Prey is that they had released all these nanobot drones that were like microscopic, and they were like swarms, and they got released into clouds.
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? They actually did it for geoengineering purposes, but then these bots were taking over humans' bodies.
Yeah.
And so you started looking younger and all this, but when somebody found out what was going on and they took the bots away from the person, they actually was like Dorian Gray. They were dying underneath. And that is what Vivian's suggesting is happening with AI in some instances.
Interesting. Yeah, and it leads me to want to like have the conversation about specifically entertainment. I mean, obviously you're showcasing a film there. We talk a lot about sci-fi films in our work, but whether it's entertainment or the gamification of the world, that's also has media elements to it.
Absolutely.
Communication.
Absolutely does, yeah.
And
Crichton,
that's it.
It was on the tip of my tongue.
You did good. Thank you, Emily. I should know because Jurassic Park is my favorite. But yeah, I just think that we're going to have some folks joining us from the entertainment industry. And I think that, obviously the lines have been blurred for a minute.
Yeah.
Between
what is media and what is entertainment?
Yes. And I mean, again, if you look at our current election, and part of the reason why we have the candidate we have from the Republican Party is that he was very popular in the reality media space.
It's where he came from.
Right. And so
and this isn't it goes all the way back to Ronald Reagan, he was an actor.
Yeah, no. So I think that clearly the way, again, going back to the meme piece, and even social media to some extent, obviously has an entertainment aspect of it.
Absolutely.
But when we think about, our children and what they're consuming, and young people, what they're consuming from a media perspective, it's a very important topic.
It's very important. It's so important.
I mean, when the amount of time that our kids and our young people are spending, whether it's online or in these entertainment spaces, is considerable.
It's a considerable amount of time.
It's now flipped in terms of the time that you and I, we're not going to go down the path of like, we're Gen Xers and we were told to come in when the lights came on outside, which is all true.
Yeah, our parents said on Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, see you Sunday.
Exactly. Look, we get it. It's a different world. And we didn't parent necessarily our children the same way we were parented. But the truth is that our kids are spending less time in their community spaces with people. And we're not the type of futurists that are anti-technology, I think some people would be surprised to know that based on some of our stances, but we're not. We're not anti-technology, but we are.
We do a good job of saying like we're not pro-technology.
Yeah, we're
not like fawning over technology,
No.
which is what a good futurist should be doing.
Yeah.
It's like I should be questioning everything.
We explore the ramifications of technology, but also social change, economic, environmental change. And so I think when we have this conversation and we build these scenarios in October in Burbank, we're going to talk about the entertainment aspect of this, especially within our youth and our kids, because that's a big part of it.
I love this point that you're making, and I want to jump off here on something because I've been reading a lot of Douglas Rushkoff lately. And of course, read Douglas Rushkoff for years. If you don't know Douglas, he's a media theorist and very popular. He's written so many books. And he has a podcast that's been going for the last couple of years now, which is amazing. You should definitely listen to his podcast. It's called Team Human. I'm on Team Human.
We could have a whole conversation about podcasts, but go ahead. As media.
I know. And so he's a media theorist. That's where he came from. That's his background.
That's right.
And he wrote a blog because he has a Substack blog and he has, multiple blogs, and he's just so prolific. And that's the whole point. He wrote a blog recently saying finally, here we are in 2024. And I've had this revelation, at least for me, that I'm going to cut back on the amount of content that I'm putting out there, because the internet itself as an entity demands that I put out content every day.
Yeah.
Or I'm suddenly forgotten. You're forgotten in 24 hours.
It's wild.
And he said, so the pace of the internet is not healthy for me or you or anybody.
I was just going to talk about the well-being aspect of this and the mental health aspect of it.
And so he said, it's like there's a constant desire by the internet to feed the need.
Yeah.
And he said, and it stops me from being my most creative when I know I have to write an article every day. I don't get 3, 5, maybe even 30 days to think about what's really burning on my heart and what I want to put out there, because you're like, Douglas Rushkoff hasn't written anything for 30 days. I guess he's irrelevant now.
It does reward a very different pace and pattern. And as a result, again, we're back to the attention piece again.
That's why I was playing off that.
While again, I think it's super interesting to see how memes can help generate, language and story. There's a negative side effect of that.
Yeah.
In that,
especially on these organizations, right? So let's go back.
Individuals.
Of course. Absolutely.
You feel like there's a dopamine rush of like not only being a content creator and getting those likes, but just in the consumption of that.
I mean, that's why it is the reason why you scroll and scroll and scroll. You're not scrolling because all that content's so great.
Yeah.
It's not a cool movie.
Yeah.
Half those things you watch, if not more, are just like, you're just scrolling.
It's potato chips.
It's potato chips. It's literally physiological. It is chemical. It's chemical in your brain.
So I think when we do the course, when we do our foundations program live online, October to November, the 2-week program that's coming up, our final program, and we talk about well-being, I'm certain this nonstop information consumption
is going to come up then.
It's going to come up then as well.
I just wanted to stay on this for just a moment because this controls the way that these organizations act that they wouldn't have when we were kids, when there was no internet and you had the telephone was a cord on a wall. And that's fascinating too, right? Because like our phones now are media objects, or communication objects, or media objects. That's literally, you have constant media in your pocket at all times. But then, it's like we're going to be very thoughtful about what's on the news tonight, which lasts for an hour starting at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
And today, from the moment the sun rises until the sun rises again, MSNBC, Fox, whatever the news, they're like, next story, next story, next story, next story. And they're having to produce this stuff constantly so you'll never take your eyeballs off of them. And so, there's not that much information, so they have to make up stuff. They have to make up shit, you know. And it doesn't matter where you lean, they're always like, what's another story, you know, we could come up with? And it's like, oh, what if I said that, you know, the election really hinges on the low information voters and blah blah blah. You know, it's like, you're just making up stuff now.
It's the clickbait.
Yeah.
It's the clickbait of it all. No, and not only that, I just think that, you know, you get to the point where you understand human psychology and the psychology of fear, right?
That's right.
And I think that's to bring it full
How do I
circle.
manipulate people so they won't take their eyeballs off?
Right. And it brings us full circle to, you know, really the two campaigns that we're seeing. And by the way, if you're in the US and you haven't checked your voter registration, please go check your voter registration.
Again last night because I read a scary story.
Yeah, check your voter registration. Check it every day until November. Vote early if you can, and take 5 to 10 people with you when you vote. So it's super important that everybody use their voice. But there are really two campaigns happening right now. One of fear, and you know, pessimism, and saying that, you know, we're going down as a nation and as a world. And then there's the one a campaign about hope and transformation. And it really, I think for us personally, speaks so much to us because we think about foresight. There's so, I know you see the red car, you view everything through the lens of your own experience and your own expertise. But when I hear the messaging and the conversations coming out of this election cycle, I get super excited because, you know, especially coming out of the Harris campaign, it's a lot of foresight, conversation, and language.
Yep.
And so I think I want to leave on this topic of how can media help us transform and help us create better, more equitable futures.
That's
because without this media aspect, we will not have transformative futures. Like I'm not going to say it hinges on media, but I'm going to tell you that it's a critical aspect of if we go one way or another.
Media still, it might be warped, but media still hasn't lost its place since the fourth estate. And I would say that the way that we're arguing at the moment right now, you could argue that it will lose or has lost its place as the fourth estate, but it hasn't, because communication, media, information is always going to be important. And as a matter of fact, if there were, you know, we've seen countries that have gone into authoritarianism and lockdown, and all that does is it pushes that kind of media underground and people start rebelling with information.
Yeah.
It is the fastest way to, you know, overthrow or topple is not through arms and weapons, but through information and the pen,
right,
you know, the quill.
Which is why, again, folks that, you know, want to have us question everything, start by, you know, saying that the media is flawed and that they're corrupt, right? And so it's such an interesting psychological thing that you see happening, you know, historically. And I mean, again, the whole brainwashing aspect of this is wild. We've lost a generation of Americans to this conversation and to this brainwashing. But I think the flip side of that is true too. And I think part of it, again, hinges on getting a more educated populace and helping our, you know, older generations and younger generations be digital and media literate.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of the work that we do with our library partners centers on this, and libraries play such a critical role, which is why their funding is so important. But it's thinking about those terms. When I get worried here in the state of Florida, we've already seen early indications of what will happen during another Trump presidency with the removal of one of the presidents from my alma mater at the University of Florida, and the replacement of that person with an individual that had much different political leanings, religious leanings. And again, it's purposeful. It's a purposeful move in that direction. So how can we position ourselves as futurists? What can we do to ensure that media helps us transform and create better futures?
Yeah, I mean, well, actually here in the state of Florida, we're one of several states that are well known for now banning books. And as a matter of fact, there was a famous story last week where one of the school's librarians is actually under an investigation now because she literally went too far. She called for one of those dumpsters to be put at the school, and they found like she threw away 5,400 books or something just on her own opinion. She was like, I'm the librarian, so this book goes, this book goes. And so now librarians in Florida, their job is to throw away books, to throw away information, to throw away, and that's a type of media as well.
Absolutely.
So when we're talking about the future of media, we can't just be talking about a channel on the television. We're talking about any way that information gets to people. And you've heard us already talk about entertainment and all of these different aspects that really are about, how we create better futures. And as Yvette so rightly says, we have to find ways, if we're going to create more equitable, caring, hopeful, loving, reconciling futures, we have to find a way for people to be more media savvy or information or critical thinkers, really.
Yeah. I mean, I can't wait for this program in Burbank, and maybe we'll publish the work out of that. We published the work out of our April Foundations program, where we focus on the future of healthcare. And if you're interested in getting that, let us know. I mean, Emily might be able to drop that in the chat. I don't know if she has that handy, but that future of healthcare output is a really good way of seeing what's going to happen in our program in Burbank. Maybe we'll republish the Burbank results or publish the Burbank outcomes on the future of media scenarios, because I'm hopeful that one way that we can create more transformative futures is by mapping the future, by using foresight tools like we're going to do across those 3 days, and mapping not only a transformative future, but a fortress and maybe a market future. We do this in our program, 3 scenarios around this topic, and then exploring each and saying, okay, how can we pull, elements of each to ensure some things don't happen or continue to happen, and at the same time getting the more positive aspirational visions we have for the future of media to happen sooner. And what does this mean to the organizations that we're leading, that are media organizations? What does it mean to the educational institutions that our children are participating in? What does it mean for these platforms that we're all day in and out of? How can we craft and create those to create the type of futures that we want to see? I think that's ultimately the question as futurists. That's why I love this job so much.
I know, it's so powerful. I was just thinking, this, like, who knows who's on here with us? And I see that there's been a good number of views in and out, and people dropping in and out, coming onto the program. And it's like, you see the future of media, and maybe the expectation is that, Frank and Yvette are going to sit here and they're going to talk about how robots will be journalists, or, what the future of media might look like. It goes straight to our brains through a Neuralink or whatever.
Also possible.
But as you can see, those are viable topics, potentially. But when we talk about the future of something, we're really talking about how the way we think about the future and our mindset and the values that go forward, that is the most important aspect. One of my new favorite things to say, and they hear me say to the office all the time, is that we can't change systems. Systems don't change. They are systems, and they wouldn't be a system if they changed. They'd be a different system. But we can change hearts and minds, and that's what creates new systemic change, and that's what creates new pathways forward. So it's really hearts and minds. As a matter of fact, today, if you're listening and you're a futurist inside of an organization, your main goal, maybe you won't tell anybody this, but it's not really to change outcomes or goals or objects. Those are things that happen. Is to really change hearts and minds, because foresight doesn't stick unless it changes values, hearts, and minds.
Yeah.
That's how it's, people say, how do I make foresight sticky? And they don't ever like my answer, because they want the answer to be, make this policy in your organization, or this particular tool will make it sticky, or whatever. None of that happens. It's changing hearts and minds. And it's really the power of foresight and futures thinking, because it does change hearts and minds. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that happen. So if you're doing a good job in your foresight and futures thinking efforts, you're going to change hearts and minds, and that's going to change outcomes and efforts and policies and strategies and all those things, because leaders will say, like, we're doing this a different way, and we need a new strategy, and we need to hire new people, once our hearts and minds are changed.
Yeah. And how to change those hearts and minds is really by taking people through this type of conversation and framing it with the tools and methods of foresight. When we get together in a few weeks in Burbank, we'll be doing futures wheels. We'll be doing a CLA, causal layered analysis on media. I can't wait to dive into that and think and unpack what's currently happening and then build a more transformative vision. We'll be applying sci-fi. We'll be thinking about obviously scenarios, themes, implications, values, the trends that are influencing and impacting the future of media, as well as the type of future we want to create around the future of media. So it's participatory, as foresight always is. And again, we encourage you, wherever you are in your foresight practice, to use these tools every single day. That's what makes them super powerful.
I don't know too if our LA partners are on or listening, or either one of them are, but our good friends Katie Rucker and Jenny Denon from Next Gen Collaborative are partnering with us out in LA. And if you've not, met them or seen Next Gen Collaborative, you should look them up online. I thought that maybe as I said that, one of them would chime in the chat, but they probably were here and they're gone now. They're busy. But it's great that we're having them as partners as well.
Yeah.
And they're super concerned and living out in the LA area where when we talk about media is everywhere, but certainly LA is this hub of certain types of media and the entertainment capitals. So
media is important, whether you are leading an organization, you're a strategist in an organization. It's how data is presented, how story unfolds, all of that is media. So I think it's going to be a really, really fun session. And again, just to recap, if you haven't already joined us or participated in our Ask a Future, so I was going to try to bring that visual back up. But we are doing this crowdsourced Ask a Futurist project. It finishes up, I think this week, Emily. I don't remember now if it's this week or next week when we close that out. But it's happening shortly. So if you haven't already joined, please join us for that Ask a Futurist project. You'll get access to the final FAQ. And if you're interested, you'll also be entered into free tuition. 2 more foundations programs coming up. And if you don't see us online over the next couple of weeks, it's in part because we're going to be in the woods in Maine. So we're really excited that our Transformations Retreat is coming up. If you're not able to join us at the Transformations Retreat, stay tuned, because there's going to be other ways that you can be part of that community and you don't even have to fly anywhere. So more to come on that after that retreat closes out this year. So check back with us. And then I wanted to share as well, next month, well, technically the month of October. I'm already thinking we're in September.
Yeah, well, we almost are. Basically, we are.
So our next Wicked Opportunities Live is our favorite one of the year.
Mm-hmm.
It happens on October 31st.
That's right.
Unless we have one in September. I don't think we have a Wicked Opportunity Live. I feel like we just had this conversation and the team is like, really? Do we have to talk to you again? Regardless, October 31st, I know we're going to have a Wicked Opportunities Live, and it's your favorite because it's your favorite holiday.
Halloween edition of Wicked Opportunities Live, which fits in with the whole Wicked concept. Even though Wicked here means complex, it's not about being evil.
I think we need to go even further. Last year we dressed up.
No, this year's got to be better.
This year we've got to I feel like we might need to look into getting a makeup artist and really.
It's the whole 9 yards. It's the whole 9 yards.
That video in our YouTube channel is really funny to me because I look ridiculous, and then we talk about a really serious topic, which is really funny.
Yeah, it's hard to take us serious anyway, but
in general.
No, I just want to say this too before, because people are dropping off, I see, and it doesn't matter to me one way or another. I just want your vote. No, I'm just kidding. Every day I get to work with Yvette.
Oh, so you're waiting till everybody leaves to give me a shout.
No, it's on the recording. That's my point. You can all hear it. But I get to work with one of the, in my opinion, the most amazing futurists in the world.
Oh,
every day. And we are super excited about the work we do here, but we're nothing without our community. So
Yeah.
we love all of you so much, and we're so happy that you could join us here at the end of August for this Wicked Opportunities Live. And there's a million other ways to join in with us, and you're going to hear some new ones coming up. Of course, again, as Yvette says, join us with the Ask a Futurist project, but we're going to be talking more about what we're going to do for the next year with transformations and training programs and client work. And
So stay
always,
tuned.
always here for you.
Yeah. Stay tuned, everybody. We will see you around. We'll see you online. See you on the media. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.